You're listening to the Drink Less Booze, Live How You Choose podcast, the podcast that will help you to change your relationship with alcohol one step at a time so that you can focus on what truly matters. I am your host, Dr. Fiona Dowman. I'm a qualified clinical psychologist in the UK, and I'm here to share evidence-based mindfulness and values-driven strategies to help you understand what's keeping you stuck and take practical steps towards lasting change. Quick note, if you feel you might be physically dependent on alcohol, quitting suddenly can be dangerous, so it's best to speak to your GP or your local alcohol service. Hello and welcome to another episode of Drink Less Booze, Live How You Choose. This episode is about emotional drinking. Are you drinking to numb emotional pain? In this episode, I will cover what emotions are, why we feel emotions, and how alcohol can become a coping mechanism for difficult emotions, and what you can do about it if you're trying to cut down on your drinking. For a lot of people who are drinking more than they would like, they find themselves caught up in a cycle of drinking to cope with difficult feelings, beating themselves up about it, feeling worse, and then drinking to cope with those difficult feelings. So imagine a scenario. Alex has come home from a really hard day at work. He's feeling stressed. He's finding it hard to relax. He's pacing around. He's been snappy with his wife. He's really worried about the work that he has to do the next day. So he decides to have a drink, and he ends up drinking until he falls asleep on the sofa. So the next day when he wakes up, he doesn't feel rested. He's got pain in his neck from where he'd been sleeping in an awkward position. And on his commute to work, he starts to beat himself up about the drinking and the fact that he wasn't able to apologise to his wife because he was too busy drinking. And he starts to think about how much of a bad person he is. And when he goes to work, he finds that it's really difficult to concentrate. His stress levels start to go up. And he just feels overwhelmed by all these difficult feelings that he's having. He decides to drink again to try to take the edge off. From this scenario, there are quite a few different emotions involved. We had the initial stress from work and the anxiety. And then there was guilt and shame and more stress and anxiety. And essentially, Alex ended up feeling overwhelmed. You can see from the scenario that emotions can be a trigger for drinking. But then after someone has a drink, if they start to beat themselves up about that and start to feel guilt and shame around the drinking, that can trigger drinking again. So it ends up being a bit of a cycle. So what are these emotions that I've spoken about? I've mentioned stress, shame, anxiety, and these are all words that you'll be familiar with. But what are they really? Scientists have struggled to come up with a consensus about what emotions actually are because it's quite a complex process. However, most will agree that emotions are a complex chemical reaction that happens throughout the body. This causes physical changes in the body, which is why, for example, when people are anxious, they often have physical sensations like heart racing or sweating, for example, and these physical sensations prepare us for action. That's why when someone's anxious, they get prepared for fight or flight. And language allows us to describe our emotions. In different cultures, there are different ways of describing emotions. In the English language, there are hundreds of words that we can use, like happy, sad, anxious, etc. But ultimately, how we feel is a private experience that happens internally, so we can hide how we feel from other people. Why do we experience emotions? From an evolutionary perspective, emotions are a really important communication tool for survival, but they also communicate something to us about what we need. So they help us to communicate with other people and also communicate something to us about what we need. Some emotions make us feel good, like excitement, but when emotions make us feel bad, that's really difficult because as humans, we don't want to feel discomfort. We want to get rid of that, understandably, and our brains are wired for problem solving, so we will find solutions. So what can happen is alcohol can become a way of numbing emotional pain, escaping from it, and it's pretty effective at doing that, which is why people will do it over and over again. The problem is, of course, that it comes at a cost. So, what is the cost? When I ask this question to my clients, I often hear things like, the cost of drinking more than I want to is I end up with a hangover and I have to deal with that, or I feel anxious the next day, or I lose time that I could have been productive, or it's affecting my relationships, it's affecting me financially, etc. The list goes on. And the problem is that a lot of these costs of drinking end up being long-term problems, like the impact that it has on our health is going to be in the long term. The benefit of drinking, which is to numb the emotional pain, is only temporary. It only works for a really short while. So based on that, alcohol isn't really the best solution for dealing with pesky emotions. If we go back for a moment to the purpose of emotions, they're a communication tool. We can actually use emotions to our advantage in the sense that we can start to treat them as messengers. They're telling us something. They're trying to get our attention so that we can do something in response. So if we start to pause and listen to what our emotions are telling us and be really curious, we can then thoughtfully decide what we need to do in response that would be helpful, rather than reacting and trying to get rid of these emotions really quickly using methods that are not helpful in the long run. So it's about dropping the struggle with emotions. It's a little bit like the popular quicksand metaphor. For a lot of us, if we ended up stuck in quicksand, our instinct would be to panic and try to escape really quickly. And the more that we tried to escape, the deeper we would sink into the quicksand. This is really similar to emotions. What happens is the more that we try to fight them and escape them, the deeper we sink into them and we end up feeling stuck and overwhelmed. So the solution in quicksand is you have more chance of escaping by relaxing and allowing yourself to float. And it's very similar with feelings in the sense that if we notice and name our feelings, accept them and make space for them, they're much easier to manage. We'll feel less overwhelmed, and it frees us up to do the things that matter the most. So, how do we do this in practical terms? Well, there's a simple mindfulness exercise that helps with noticing, naming our emotions without judgment, and then grounding ourselves, which then allows us to make decisions about what we want to do moving forward. To do this, I'm going to invite you to pause, check in with yourself, and just notice how you're feeling. Right now, whereabouts do you notice a feeling in your body? Do you notice any sensations? What do they feel like? If you're struggling to notice whereabouts they are in your body, just notice that you're struggling to notice. Because what we're doing is just acknowledging how we're feeling in this moment. Whether it's a clear sensation or a clear emotional label, like happy or sad, or whether you're struggling to place it, struggling to label it, but you're still acknowledging what's going on for you right now in this present moment. So once you've acknowledged that, be curious about what it is that you're experiencing without trying to change it, without trying to make it different or escape from it, just simply noticing. And once you've done that, you can then decide, what message is this feeling trying to give to you? What is it trying to guide you towards? Is it trying to get you to rest or do some exercise or talk to someone or eat something? And it can be difficult to figure out what messages your emotions are trying to tell you. But by simply acknowledging that your emotions are trying to tell you something, that means that you've acknowledged that your emotions are on your side, they're on your team, and they're not something to be fighting with. And that can be helpful in itself. So I'm going to leave you with that exercise. Just taking a moment when you can to pause, notice how you're feeling. Don't get caught up too much in what to label it as. Just whatever comes to mind, however it feels for you. The exercise is just about acknowledging, pausing, checking in, and making space for the emotion rather than automatically trying to get rid of it, which is often what we do. So I hope you found that helpful. Speak to you soon. If you want actionable steps to start drinking less alcohol today, download my free mindful drinking audio guide by going to drinklessbooze.co.uk or by clicking the link in the show notes.